It's 9 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. And breaking this evening, the BBC presenter at the centre of the alleged sex pics scandal is the broadcaster's star news anchor, very much the face of the BBC, Hugh Edwards. This, of course, confirmed by his wife late this afternoon. In a statement released on her husband's behalf, Vicky Flint said that Hugh is now suffering from serious mental health issues and is receiving inpatient hospital care. So for the next 2 hours, we will bring you exclusive live reaction to Edwards finally being named, with analysis from BBC legends like its former chief political correspondent John Sargent and ex-Tory MP and Beeb broadcaster Edwina Currie. Plus, I'll ask my superstar panel if Hugh Edwards was the victim of a media witch hunt or if celebrities' private lives are really any of our business. Tonight, I'm joined by Christine Hamilton, Adam Brooks and Matthew Laza. And free speech champion Toby Young will tackle the left's attempt to use this scandal as a stick to beat the free press with. Were The Sun reporting in the national interest? Did they act correctly? I'll be asking Toby before the end of the show. We will ask all the tough questions tonight, and we'll bring you tomorrow's front pages hot off the press as well. Don't forget, my digest is on its way, my reaction. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. Let's go. On a momentous day and an exploding media story, you are watching GB News, Britain's news channel. My first on-air reaction to the breaking news that Hugh Edwards has been named as the star at the heart of this BBC sex scandal. That's my digest, straight after the headlines with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, as you've been hearing, Hugh Edwards has been named as the BBC presenter at the centre of the broadcaster's controversy. In a statement, his wife, Vicky Flint, says, Hugh is suffering from serious mental health issues. As is well documented, he has been treated for severe depression in recent years. The events of the last few days have greatly worsened matters. He has suffered another serious episode and is now receiving inpatient hospital care where he'll stay for the foreseeable future. She continued saying, in the circumstances and given Hugh's condition, I would like to ask that the privacy of my family and everyone else caught up in these upsetting events is respected. I know that Hugh is deeply sorry that so many colleagues have been impacted by recent media speculation. We hope this statement will bring that to an end. Well, it comes after the Metropolitan Police confirmed that no criminal offence has been committed by Mr Edwards in relation to the claims. The force say they have completed their assessment and are taking no further action. The Met has advised the BBC it can now continue with its own internal investigation. BBC Director General Tim Davie has told staff in a message that it's been a challenging few days. The BBC released a statement reading, "We have seen the statement from the police confirming they have completed their assessment and are not taking further action. We're grateful to them for completing this work at speed." It continues reading, "The police had previously asked us to pause our fact-finding investigations and we will now move forward with that work, ensuring due process and a thorough assessment of the facts whilst continuing to be mindful of our duty of care to all involved." Well, meanwhile, the Sun newspaper says it does not plan to publish further allegations about Hugh Edwards. It comes after it published details of 4 claims made against him. They include allegations of paying a teenager for sexually explicit pictures and sending threatening messages. Well, let's bring you up to date now with some of the other stories tonight. G7 leaders have signed a joint declaration in support of Ukraine, promising to stand by the country for as long as it takes. It comes as Defence Secretary Ben Wallace suggested Ukraine should show gratitude for the military support it has been given. But the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the Ukrainian people, including its president, are incredibly grateful for the support the UK has shown. The first asylum seekers have arrived at a former RAF airbase in Essex. 46 people are now at Wethersfield, with more individuals to arrive in the coming weeks. The site, which can house up to 1,700 single adult men, is expected to be fully operational by autumn. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, it's back to Mark.
After days of fevered speculation, the BBC star alleged to have paid a teenager for explicit images is Hugh Edwards, the face of BBC News. His wife, Vicky Flynn, issued a statement on his behalf saying that he was suffering mental health issues and is now receiving inpatient hospital care. Meanwhile, detectives from the Met Police have ended their assessment into the allegations and have determined there is no evidence of a criminal offence. The BBC says it's now resuming its investigation whilst continuing to be mindful of its duty of care to all involved. Let me first say that this is clearly a deeply traumatic time for both Hugh Edwards and his family, and we wish him well in his treatment for mental health issues, which we understand he has battled for some years. My prayers are with him for a speedy recovery. Stories like the tragedy of ITV presenter Caroline Flack ought to give everyone pause for thought about how public figures are treated, given the fact that, yes, they may be celebrities, but they're human beings too. However, the story is like a nuclear bomb for the BBC, given the fact that Edwards was the man who fronted the King's coronation, the election night coverage, and our late, great Queen's funeral. He's the presenter of their flagship evening news bulletin and is, to all intents and purposes, the face of the BBC. Anything significant that happens in the country, a death, a birth, a resignation, a war, a natural disaster, Hugh Edwards has been the man telling you. Hugh Edwards is BBC News and BBC News is Hugh Edwards. So questions remain about whether such a big star on the channel was willing to possibly risk his reputation with alleged inappropriate behaviour, including the suggestion of large payments of money to a youngster whose parents say had drug issues. The potential breaking of lockdown rules to meet another alleged youngster, and reports from the BBC's own news website about alleged threatening texts that led to an individual feeling unsafe and afraid. Plus, Hugh Edwards is facing fresh allegations tonight of inappropriate behaviour from his own BBC colleagues. Junior staff members revealed to the 6 o'clock news that the presenter had sent inappropriate messages to them, but also confirmed that they had not previously officially complained to the corporation. Hugh Edwards will in time have an opportunity to defend himself, refute these claims and offer his side of the story. It's right that he has that opportunity and he should get a fair hearing. But the BBC look to have been asleep at the wheel in their handling of the first set of allegations, having sat on their hands for 7 weeks before even raising the issue with the presenter himself. If the BBC had dealt with this more swiftly and competently, they might have prevented this press storm and spared a huge amount of stress and anguish for their biggest star. It's a bad day for Hugh Edwards as he battles for his health and the future of his career. But for the BBC, it's even worse. Let's get reaction now from my superstar panel. Broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Christine, at the heart of this is a lot of human suffering. We have alleged victims and we have a massive star in Hugh Edwards currently in hospital being treated for mental health issues. So this is in the end a human tragedy.
Of course it is. You're absolutely right in what you said. He may be a megastar, and to a lot of people he's just somebody they see on television, but he is, beneath all this, a human being. I actually feel more sorry for his wife, his children, and if the allegations are true, and they are still allegations at the moment, if they are true, for his alleged victims, the young people. If there is a young person who is now addicted to crack cocaine because of his actions and because he's been paying him money for these pictures, that is appalling. And one wonders what sort of help the BBC are offering to that young person who clearly can't afford to go to the Priory. Are they offering them any help at all? I mean, that's where celebrities go, isn't it? If they are if they need mental health problems, if they have mental health problems. I shouldn't think the NHS is picking up this child, who clearly needs help. But yes, it is a human tragedy, and the real... what Hugh Edwards did or didn't do is... we will discover in due course. And this is the other thing that I find difficult, is we still don't know whether any of this is actually true. One can't help but believe it must be, because otherwise he would have denied it, or his wife would have denied it. All she said in that statement is that he is the person in the headlights. She hasn't said this is not true and he will deny it in due course. So we have to draw our own conclusions about that. But the BBC have a hell of a lot to answer for. They really have. They have handed people like me who want to defund the BBC, they've just given us a loaded revolver to point at them. Their slowness in taking any action, they have behaved appallingly. The minute they heard about this, they should have gone straight to Hugh Edwards and say, this has come in, what have you got to say? 7 weeks before they even spoke to him. It was as though they were in awe of their biggest stars. They put them on these pedestals, they pay them these vast amounts of money, and they make their stars untouchable. I mean, it's the way they've behaved is crazy, like an ostrich with their head in the stands. I think they've done themselves untold damage, whatever the final outcome of this.
Now, Adam, no doubt in the days and weeks ahead, the plight of the alleged victims will be something that we focus on. But tonight you do have a major star in hospital with mental health issues, which I understand Hugh Edwards has struggled with for many years. And the Beeb, his employers, and perhaps the press as well, have a duty of care to him in the context of other high-profile stories like the tragedy of Caroline Flagg.
Yeah, look, again, I will reiterate, I'm thinking of the wife of Hugh Edwards and his children right now, because one thing I thought was very distasteful with the Phil Schofield saga is that the wife and kids sort of got pushed aside for this amazing, brave story. You know, obviously this isn't an amazing, brave story. This is a scandal. But we must think about his wife and his kids. It must be a terrible, terrible situation at home.
One wonders when she knew.
Right. So, again, look...
Do we have to think about him too, though?
No, look, we've got a man in hospital.
Has he suffered a sort of trial by media?
We've got a man in hospital, which is not good. He's a well-known man. If the allegations... The allegations have to be addressed. When he comes out of hospital, they're going to have to be addressed by the man, right? Whether they're true or they're not. One thing I want to speak about is if the mental health issues were known by the BBC, why is this man in such a prominent position?
Well,
he is the face of the BBC,
yes, I mean,
with the pressures and the fame that come with it. Now, if the man
it's about the pressure that was put on him, it's
true. If the man is a very fragile man and has got issues, I do not believe he should be fronting the BBC.
All the more reason, equally, to confront him when they first heard these allegations.
Look, it took 7 weeks.
There is Matthew Larson.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at the BBC for 13, 14 years. Don't defund it because I don't want my pension. I don't want my pension to be defunded.
Can I just say, you make it sound like a prison sentence?
No, it wasn't.
I did 13 years.
Absolutely, and I live to tell the tale. And look, I never worked directly with Hugh. Vicky worked in BBC Westminster like me, and you know, and Mrs. Edwards, and was, but both were really well liked. Now that is not to take away from the fact that what he's done is clearly inappropriate. But let's remind ourselves, the Met have been absolutely crystal clear that there are no criminal allegations to answer, and if the Met have sort of sorted that out in 24 hours, there mustn't be. On the original allegations, which is... I mean, I actually think the BBC, which I'm despite my years there, prepared to be critical of, have done quite well over the last few days. And whether they should have responded to the original allegations, over the last few days. The issue about the original allegations is the parents, the mum, remember the young person at the centre of these, whose parent, you've got parents saying one thing and the young person in question saying another.
Very expensive lawyers. Who's paying for those?
Well, and then 2 more people coming out.
But absolutely, and that doesn't mean that they aren't allegations to answer.
What's your point about the parents?
The point about the parents is, apparently apparently they originally turned up standing outside the broadcasting house and making allegations. Do you know what? If you work at the BBC, you get all sorts of things and all sorts of allegations all the time. It's clearly there was a system error where they didn't go up the food chain. Unless they're lying, the management, Tim Davies says he heard about it on Thursday. Frankly, I don't think he's lying because that would be found out later. So the allegation should have been turbocharged, but not every allegation, as we know, is true.
OK, if they had acted 7 weeks ago, when it was this whole storm wouldn't be happening now. So it is the BBC's fault, their process, of why now
not necessarily
it's exploded.
How much did the Sun? Well, the Sun say they haven't paid the parents.
No, that's correct. We understand.
Right.
No money has been.
If they've done
but
it right,
the young person in question is absolutely adamant that the parents are wrong, and I'm afraid we have to listen to the young person as much as we listen to the parents.
Through expensive London lawyers.
The young person is allegedly a crack cocaine addict, according to the parents.
According to the parents.
Yes,
according to the
if this whole storm hadn't come out, would we be having BBC
There's a lot of people, if they're not,
staff now saying allegations against you?
Well, let me tell you, we will be debating this for the next 2 hours. It is, of course, absolutely devoted to this story now. We really cannot discuss anything else. Why? Because it's the face of the organisation, Hugh Edwards, who has been revealed today as the star at the heart of this alleged sex scandal. It's the national broadcaster that you and I pay a lot of money towards, to the tune of £159. You're threatened with jail if you don't pay it, so I make no apologies for devoting the entirety of tonight's show to this BBC in crisis story. Now, let me bring you up to date on what the Met Police have been saying. Detectives from the Met's Specialist Crime Command have now concluded their assessment and have determined there is no information to indicate that a criminal offence has been committed. We're aware of media reporting of further allegations against the same individual. No specific details or information about these allegations have been passed to us, and therefore there is no police action at this time. And BBC Director General Tim Davies this evening told staff this will no doubt be a difficult time for many after a challenging few days. I want to reassure you that our immediate concern is our duty of care to all involved. Something I want to raise with both my guests and you, our viewers, Dan at GBNews.com, is whether or not the criminality is a red herring and whether this alleged behaviour is also inappropriate for such a high-profile figure. Given the fact that we know who the allegations are focused on now, you have to wonder whether he will keep his job. We'll be talking to John Sargent, very close friend of Hugh Edwards, a little later. Christine Hamilton, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larser, thank you so much. We'll catch up very soon. As I've said, coming up, former BBC man of 30 years, John Sargent, delivers his verdict. But next, is this a crisis of the BBC's own making? Former top BBC journo Robin Aitken and Beeb broadcaster Edwina Currie thrash that one out next. Welcome back. It's time for The Clash. Earlier tonight, in a sensational media bombshell, it was revealed that Hugh Edwards is the BBC star at the centre of the £35,000 sex pics scandal. We must stress, still allegations at this stage. His wife released a statement on his behalf hours ago, saying that he's in hospital having suffered from severe mental health problems, which have worsened over the last few days. She also confirmed that the TV star, very much the face of the national broadcaster, was first told that there were allegations against him only last Thursday, 7 weeks after the Beeb were first made aware of them. And in the last few moments, Director General Tim Davie has sent a message to BBC staff saying this will no doubt be a difficult time for many after a challenging few days. I want to reassure you that our immediate concern is our duty of care to all involved. But is this a crisis of the BBC's making? Let me know your thoughts, dan@gbnews.com, or tweet me @gbnews, and do vote in the poll on Twitter. To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former BBC journalist Robin Aitken and another big former BBC star. Of course, she was on 5 Live at the weekends for at least 10 years. It was a brilliant show. Ex-Tory Minister Edwina Currie. Edwina, I know you wish no ill on our national broadcaster, your former employer, but your assessment of their handling of this crisis?
Oh, absolutely appalling, Mark. I mean, appalling. You know, back in May, the BBC was approached and told about this allegation we understand, by the family, and doesn't seem to have done an awful lot about it. I mean, you know, one of the first things you would do is actually speak to the person who is being accused, and you'd say, you know, this is what's being said. What's your response? And the whole thing stinks, to be honest. It's so unfair on Hugh Edwards. It's so unfair on his family, who have now taken the whole thing by the scruff of its neck and put out, I thought, the most wonderfully compassionate statement. His wife is clearly a very special person indeed. But it reflects extremely badly on the BBC itself. And they seem to be much more interested, whatever Tim Davie says tonight, they seem to be much more interested in the reputation of the Beeb itself. I mean, why would you sit on something like this? If you thought that some impropriety had been discovered, you would talk to the employee about it, especially if you thought it might have happened on your premises. It doesn't seem to have done that at all. If you're concerned about somebody's private life, then again, you have the conversation. If you think something illegal might have happened, you call in the police. That's what you do. You call in the police. Now, the police have said, nothing to see here, nothing illegal. They're satisfied. But somewhere along the line, the employer, this great national institution, Mark, which sets itself up as the arbiter of all moral behaviour in this country, is at fault, I think.
A fascinating and damning assessment from Edwina Currie. Robin Aitken, your reaction to this story. The BBC employ 22,000 people. Is it really their fault if one employee gets caught up in a set of allegations?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think that Edwina's allegations about the BBC there are quite fair. After all, this is one man, and his demons were riding him hard, clearly. And he's had a breakdown, which is terrible for him and terrible for his family. I agree that there was a delay. Clearly, the initial complaint came in 7 weeks ago. But it has to be said that the BBC does get a lot of complaints all the time about various members of staff. Now, Hugh Edwards was a very prominent member of staff, so you might think, well, they should have been a bit more alert about this. But look, what Hugh Edwards did, and these are allegations, okay, we don't know what he did, but let's assume that there's some truth in these allegations. And by the way, I think that it's a fair assumption to say that there is some truth in them, because newspapers, in my experience, don't go out on a limb on highly libelous information like this. So let's assume there is something in these allegations.
Well, can we agree, Robin, that the allegations still stand? I think that's probably the best way to put it, that the allegations still stand and are being investigated.
They're still allegations.
Yeah.
Okay, they remain as allegations only. This is behaviour, private behaviour by Hugh Edwards. Now, the picture painted is a very unpleasant one. He has used his power and his money, allegedly, to get some young person to abase themselves for his sexual gratification.
No.
Now, I don't think that an employer can necessarily police that kind of personal behavior. I mean, they couldn't do it for you, they couldn't do it for me, obviously. You know, this is between Hugh and his own conscience. So that side of it, I don't think the BBC is culpable for in any way at all. Now, okay, there was a delay, and 7 weeks, it looks a bit tardy. But, you know, knowing the BBC, as I do, I worked there for 25 years, anyone who's worked in the BBC knows that it's got this labyrinthine bureaucracy behind it. It's got reams and reams of management. I could imagine the way this would have sludgily moved through the system with no very speedy response to an allegation like that. So, look, I'm not saying the BBC is faultless in this. I'm sure it isn't. I mean, one thing that really might be, they might very well be at fault, is if they had some inkling that Hugh Edwards was in some way cracking up, you know, if there were signs, and also if there were complaints internally about Edwards' behaviour towards his colleagues, and if those allegations were sat on, if those complaints by other BBC staff members were not acted on, then I think the BBC would certainly be at fault in that case. But we don't know that is true. That's what I'm saying.
Interesting. Briefly, if you can, Edwina, do you agree with Robin Aitken that really this is about Hugh Edwards and his own conscience?
No, I don't. No, I don't. In fact, I think that's making an assumption about Hugh's own behaviour, and I don't think we have any right or indeed any evidence to do that. Bearing in mind that allegations of all sorts, as Robin rightly says, get made against anybody that's in public life, and some have some substance and some have no substance whatsoever, and sometimes they are even malicious or they are based on a misunderstanding. We cannot make any assumptions at all about the allegations that have been made.
Okay.
What we can, I think, be concerned about is the way that the Beeb handle them. And indeed, if they have lots of them, they need to have a big department to handle them. And they need to handle them with a great deal more sensitivity and a great deal more speed.
OK, Robin, give me 10 seconds.
Look, I mean, forgive me, but if there was nothing in this, if there was nothing at all in this, if this was all a flight of fancy, we wouldn't be sitting here talking tonight about it. I mean, something has happened.
Okay.
And you, I mean, it's all very well to say, well, you know, these are merely allegations. Okay, they are merely allegations.
Okay.
But if they were just groundless allegations, then actually nothing would be happening at all. As it is, the BBC has got a real crisis on its hands.
Robin, good to meet you for the first time. I look forward to our next encounter. Robin Aitken is a former top BBC journalist and a very good friend of the show, good friend of the channel, good friend of mine, former Conservative minister and ex-BBC star Edwina Currie. Edwina, I wish we had longer, but we'll pick up the conversation on a future occasion. Who do you agree with is the Hugh Edwards crisis of the BBC's making? Well, Chuck says, BBC, big blundering crisis. It's not their fault, it happened, but as usual, they've made a hash of managing the crisis. Blogging Blabber on Twitter says, of course it isn't. How silly. It needs a radical shake-up, however. Billy Joe says the BBC has utterly failed their so-called complaints investigation process. Basically, they did nothing. The Sun haven't done anything wrong here, and at least they had substance in this torrid story. Well, we don't know if it is substance. They are allegations at this stage. Your verdict is now in. 64% agree that the BBC have created this crisis. 36% say they have not. Coming up, the BBC's former chief political correspondent John Sargent joins us, and he is a former close friend of Hugh Edwards. He knows him well. John Sargent's reaction next.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Stays unsettled over the next few days. We'll have showers on Thursday and then rain spreading in for Friday and turning quite wet and windy as we move into the weekend. Last area of low pressure that we've had the last few days pulls away, and then this area of low pressure moves in to end the week and into the weekend, bringing unsettled conditions for all of us. There's still some showers around to end Wednesday, largely across the north and the west. Overnight, the clearest spells across eastern and southeastern parts of England. Elsewhere, still a mixture of showers, and temperatures generally holding up in double figures tonight, generally 11 to 14 Celsius. So it means a mixed start to Thursday morning. There'll be some sunny spells from the word go, but also a scattering of showers. Thursday, as we go through the day, there'll be lots of sunshine in places, particularly across eastern areas. The cloud will bubble up. We could see some showers, but showers should be fewer and farther between compared to recent days. We could still see a few heavy ones, particularly across Scotland, but lots of places staying dry. And it will just feel a little warmer than recent days as a result. Generally high teens to low 20s. Highs around 24 degrees towards the southeast. Into Friday, it all starts to turn more unsettled. Areas of low pressure begin to move in, so we see cloud and rain sweeping in from the southwest, pushing northeastwards. This turning heavy at times, best of the dry weather holding on for longest across Scotland. Temperatures near average.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
I hope you're enjoying these weather bulletins. Aren't they great and gloriously sponsored? Coming up, former top detective Mark Williams-Thomas gives his view on the BBC's handling of the Hugh Edwards scandal. But next, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent speaks about Hugh Edwards, the man. John knows him well. We'll discuss that next. Welcome back, and if you're just joining us, in a media bombshell story, Hugh Edwards has been named as the BBC presenter at the centre of the Sex Pics scandal, first reported by the Sun newspaper on Friday. To react to this breaking news, I'm joined now by one of the biggest faces and names in the history of the BBC, their former chief political correspondent, John Sargent. John, can we talk about Hugh Edwards, the human being first, a man you know well?
Yes, I mean, I've known him as a friend and a colleague for more than 30 years. And when I first heard a few days ago that it was likely, if not known for certain, that he was the suspect presenter, I thought, well, this doesn't match with my knowledge of him or my feelings about him, because he was always so, well, sensible and cool, and the idea that he'd be shouting at people, making threats, bullying them, and then involved in a crazy, risky adventure, if that's what he was involved in, involving large sums of money. And I thought, blimey, this can't be the Hugh I know. And of course, my overwhelming feeling tonight is, thank goodness they're now talking about duty of care. Because poor old Hugh, I have to say poor old Hugh, is suffering in a mental hospital or in a mental ward of a hospital, and he's obviously very seriously ill. Well, this isn't the moment to go on about, but should he have done this and should he have done that? And I say, speaking as an old friend, thank goodness, let's hope he gets better soon. But this is not to say that all these things shouldn't be properly investigated, and I'm glad the Sun has decided for the moment to stop making these allegations. It may be that the media frenzy can now be at the very least paused, and people can start thinking about what Prince William says. We've got to think about more about the need for openness when it comes to talking about mental health. Because the moment something like this comes up, it's mental health, and then complete chaos reigns for several days. Well, that shouldn't have happened.
Indeed. I mean, knowing Hugh Edwards, do you have any sense of the scale of his mental health issues? And do you worry for his welfare tonight?
I certainly do worry about it because, you think of the pressure that he's been under. Death of the Queen, coronation, another coronation in Scotland, and everyone just saying, oh, you're very good, you do it as you normally do it well. But these are very tricky moments, and he's got to set the tone for these big occasions. So it's not a matter of just factual reporting. He's expected to be somehow the sort of wise man, the guru, who can work out how the United Kingdom is getting on and how it should be getting on. Well, that's a terrific weight to bear. And of course, the moment you're in public life, the extent he is, he can't go out, he can't go shopping, he can't do anything without people saying, oh, yeah, that's Hugh Edwards.
Indeed so. Married, of course, with 5 children. Devastating for the family, John.
Devastating for the family. Vicky, his wife, she used to work with me. She was a producer, so I know her. Extremely nice, balanced couple, I thought. And the idea that they've got to explain all this to their children, as well as the whole world, and that everything is in the public gaze. I mean, this is, for all of us, I think, who've had any dealings at all with sort of public, activity, whether politicians or media people, this is the ultimate nightmare, isn't it? That you've cracked out, that's what's happened to him. Suffering from mental illness, and that's what's happening for him. If Vicky says that's it, I'm sure it's right. And just think of doing all that with everybody, everyone in the hospital, everyone you see in the street, everyone watching the cars, and you think this is a sort of horrible situation for anyone. Talk about the glare of publicity, blimey. It couldn't get much worse, could it?
No, John, you'll be well aware as a veteran of political reporting that politicians don't like hypothetical questions, but I've got one for you. I think it's important, I think it's relevant to ask. These are just allegations against Hugh Edwards at the moment. If they were to be substantiated, what might the impact be on the reputation of the BBC News operation and the wider organisation of the BBC?
Well, of course, the moment you get anywhere near proving what happened, you can then contrast that with how did the BBC behave. In this case, slowly, not very impressively. They sent one email, made one phone call that wasn't replied to. So if this is what happens, if it looks as if all these allegations turn out to be true, the way the BBC handled it is not looking at all good. And the only thing you can say is, all right, well, in the last few days from the time that the Director General...
Now, we've just lost the line.
What was the best thing to do?
There you go. Well, look, John, I don't know if we can get the line back to you, because I've just got one final question to ask you, if I can, which is just the reputation, not just in terms of the BBC's handling of this, and there looks to be a case to answer, particularly that 7-week wait between the allegations first arriving and then being put to Edwards himself. But what about the brand of the BBC? If these allegations are proven to have happened, and that's a big if, we don't know, they're just allegations at the moment, but if they were to be proven, what about the reputational damage and the public's trust in those 3 iconic letters of B, B and C?
Sure, no. All these things are bound to, at least in the short term, eradicate trust in the BBC. That is perfectly true. All you can do, I suppose, is to say what other organisation would have tried to report in the detail the BBC News Department reported this particular. Can you imagine? This is the person they've worked with for many years, and they're being asked to report as if he wasn't involved with them. I mean, that is an extraordinarily difficult test, isn't it? So I don't think it's all sort of simple, oh, well, the BBC suffers. There must be some people who think, well, you know, the thing about the BBC is that they are trying, and the answer is they are trying and they matter. We all care about the BBC. That makes a big difference.
No better man to speak to tonight. John Sargent, thank you so much for your time. Coming up, my superstar panel debate whether Hugh Edwards is the victim of a media witch hunt. Were the Sun out of order with their reporting? But next, former top detective Mark Williams-Thomas gives his view on the BBC's handling of the crisis. Don't forget, he's the man that helped to out and expose Jimmy Savile. He's next. Welcome back. And breaking tonight in an exploding media story, Hugh Edwards has been named as the BBC star facing allegations of illicit behaviour from 4 young people. A statement released by his wife on his behalf read as follows. Once well enough to do so, he intends to respond to the stories that have been published. To be clear, Hugh was first told that there were allegations being made against him last Thursday. Just before Hugh Edwards came forward, the Met Police confirmed that no criminal offence had been committed by the presenter. They added, "We're aware of media reporting of further allegations against the same individual. No specific details or information about these allegations have been passed to us, and therefore there is no police action at this time." But what I can tell you is that the BBC have resumed their own internal investigation. So to discuss the developments, I'm joined by Mark Williams-Thomas, the investigative journalist and former police detective who helped expose Jimmy Savile. Mark Williams-Thomas, your reaction to the manner of the release of Hugh Edwards' name?
Good evening, Mark. Well, it had to come, and it was only a matter of days away. And of course, this afternoon, she released it on his behalf. There's been so much speculation, not just in regards to him, but of course against other presenters who have come out and defended themselves. So it was right that he came forward and said something. Her statement is very clear in terms of the fact that he is receiving mental health inpatient care and that he suffered for some period of time. But let's be very clear to split this up. The police this afternoon said there were no criminal offences in relation to allegation 1. Don't forget there are 4 separate allegations now. They haven't considered the other 3 allegations. But we also have to remember that the fact that there aren't any criminal allegations doesn't mean to say that there isn't any wrongdoing. There is a separate wrongdoing should these offences be proven in relation to his employment. This is a man who holds a very senior position within the BBC, has a position of trust and respectability. And of course, that doesn't mean to say that he can do whatever he wants. There are some very serious allegations, even if they don't get to a criminal point of view. So the matter now has been back to the BBC. The major problem we've got, of course, is that the BBC sat on this for some 49 days before they even spoke to him. What on earth were they doing for 49 days before talking to him? I have no confidence that the BBC are capable of dealing with this. So it's gone back to the BBC from the police, who said you can carry on with your investigation. The BBC now need to come forward and say, do you know what, we've got this wrong. We didn't deal with it expeditiously. We didn't deal with it appropriately. We should have spoken to him much earlier. We're now going to point someone external. Let's not get some barrister involved who probably doesn't even understand safeguarding. Let's get a safeguarding expert to get in there, understand what's going on, and start to get through as quickly as possible some clarity.
If any of these allegations are proven to be true but not criminal, what do you think of the implications for Hugh Edwards and his position at the Beeb?
I think they're huge. I mean, I'm not sure that Hugh Edwards is ever going to get back on television again. You know, some of these allegations are very serious, whether they're criminal or not. They are clearly a breach of his position. I think it's highly unlikely. But we've also got to be very clear in terms of this mental health situation. You know, a mental health situation doesn't make you start messaging young people in the manner that the allegations against him. Yes, he may well be suffering from mental health. You know, we don't know whether that's situational mental health brought upon by the most recent allegations. Anybody who's suffering the allegations and been under the spotlight like he has over the last few days, of course that's going to have an impact on his mental health, and particularly if this is a man who already suffers from mental health. So let's be really clear not to conflict that or conflate that in relation to it. And of course, what we don't know, his wife says he will respond in due course. He's not saying, I didn't do this. These are totally wrong allegations. In fact, we had John Sopel come out yesterday and say that he's very angry about it. Well, those aren't the messages really you should be sending out there. Let's see what happens. I think it's now important that BBC properly get their house together, not themselves do it, get someone else external into doing it, and let's see. I suspect we will see probably more people come forward saying that there's some level of inappropriateness that will need to be investigated.
And can I ask you, Mark Williams-Thomas, how long you think this current investigation will take? Because I would have thought the quicker the better.
Absolutely. I mean, it's taken 49 days for them to even speak to him and not pursue any other matters. They obviously haven't spoken to other people. It's only the fact that it's gone public. I mean, people are criticising the Sun, and let's be very clear. Of course, the Sun, as many other newspapers over the years, have got things wrong. But I praise the Sun. I think the Sun were very bold to take the steps that they did. And in fact, if they hadn't have taken the steps, I don't think we'd have known about this. The BBC would have covered up and carried on. They didn't even say anything until, in fact, the Sun had approached them, in which time they then decided they were going to talk to Hugh Edwards about it. So, yeah, the Sun have acted absolutely appropriately in this case. They've issued a statement to say that they are not going to be printing any new allegations in respect of him, but I think they've done a really good job. It's for the media to hold, our bodies to account, and of course the BBC is a public body. It's for the media to hold them to account. That doesn't always sit comfortably with some people, but we have a role, you have a role, those people who hold a public profile within the media, to hold other people to account. That's exactly what it is, and that's why the British media is the best in the world.
And indeed the free press, and we're going to be discussing that in the next hour. Did the Sun go too far, or is that ability to report these stories very important for democracy and also just for the public to know, especially when it comes to the state-funded national broadcaster? Finally, Mark, briefly, if you can, just looking at all the different factors here, your background is as a former top policeman and as the investigative journalist who helped expose Jimmy Savile. Clearly, the allegations and alleged crimes involved are very, very different, not on the same scale. But are there any parallels between the BBC's handling of Savile and the current situation?
Oh, exact parallels. I mean, we can't draw the comparisons in relation to the allegations as being the same, but the handling is very similar. Had we not have got to a position where we exposed Savile and subsequently got huge media landslide, again, the BBC would have covered it up. They did everything possible not to comply with us when we asked them for an interview or we put to them the allegations. It was only when the media massively got involved that they suddenly decided to change. And exactly the same has happened here. It's so sad because the BBC is a fantastic organisation. There's some brilliant journalists there. I've got some really good friends there, and they do a very good job. But you've got senior managers there who haven't got a clue with reality. They're utterly detached, and they make the wrong calls. What we need to do is get right people in there, and it's a real shame.
OK. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant intel from a man who knows. Mark Williams-Thomas, former investigative journalist and ex-top cop who helped expose Jimmy Savile. Coming up, political commentator and Margaret Thatcher's former aide, Niall Gardner, gives his analysis on whether BBC Director General Tim Davie should step down. But next, my superstar panel react to this big story. Is Hugh Edwards the victim of a media witch hunt? Weather's next.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Stays unsettled over the next few days. We'll have showers on Thursday and then rain spreading in for Friday and turning quite wet and windy as we move into the weekend. Last area of low pressure that we've had the last few days pulls away, and then this area of low pressure moves in to end the week and into the weekend, bringing unsettled conditions for all of us. There's still some showers around to end Wednesday, largely across the north and the west. Overnight, the clearest spells across eastern and southeastern parts of England. Elsewhere, still a mixture of showers, and temperatures generally holding up in double figures tonight, generally 11 to 14 Celsius. So it means a mixed start to Thursday morning. There'll be some sunny spells from the word go, but also a scattering of showers. Thursday, as we go through the day, there'll be lots of sunshine in places, particularly across eastern areas. The cloud will bubble up. We could see some showers, but showers should be fewer and farther between compared to recent days. We could still see a few heavy ones, particularly across Scotland, but lots of places staying dry. And it will just feel a little warmer than recent days as a result. Generally high teens to low 20s. Highs around 24 degrees towards the southeast. Into Friday, it all starts to turn more unsettled. Areas of low pressure begin to move in, so we see cloud and rain sweeping in from the southwest, pushing northeastwards. This turning heavy at times, best of the dry weather holding on for longest across Scotland. Temperatures near average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. And breaking this evening, the BBC presenter at the centre of the Sex Pics scandal is the broadcaster's star news anchor, Hugh Edwards. His wife has confirmed this information in a statement released earlier today. She has said Hugh Edwards is suffering from serious mental health issues and he is now receiving inpatient hospital care. She added that he intends to respond to the allegations once well enough to do so. For the next hour, we bring you live reaction to this exploding media bombshell, with Hugh Edwards being named, including analysis from political commentator and Margaret Thatcher's former top aide, Niall Gardner. Plus, has Hugh Edwards been the victim of a media witch hunt? Did the Sun go too far? I'll put that to my superstar panel tonight. Christine Hamilton, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larza, three droppers of truth bombs, if ever I saw one. And free speech champion Toby Young joins us live in the studio to tackle the left's attempts to use this scandal as a stick to beat the free press with. Were the Sun reporting in the national interest? We'll ask all the tough questions and bring you tomorrow's front pages, which promise to be explosive. But to bring you up to date on what has been a momentous day, particularly in relation to this exploding media story, let's go straight to our newsroom and Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, as you've been hearing, Hugh Edwards has been named as the BBC presenter at the centre of the broadcaster's controversy. In a statement, his wife, Vicky Flynn, says Hugh is suffering from serious mental health issues. As is well documented, he has been treated for severe depression in recent years. The events of the last few days have greatly worsened matters. He has suffered another serious episode and is now receiving inpatient hospital care where he'll stay for the foreseeable future. She continued writing, "In the circumstances and given Hugh's condition, I would like to ask that the privacy of my family and everyone else caught up in these upsetting events is respected. I know that Hugh is deeply sorry that so many colleagues have been impacted by the recent media speculation. We hope this statement will bring that to an end." Well, it comes after the Metropolitan Police confirmed that no criminal offence has been committed by Mr Edwards in relation to the claims. The force says they have completed their assessment and are taking no further action. The Met has advised the BBC it can continue with its own internal investigation. Well, BBC Director General Tim Davie has told staff in a message that it's been a challenging few days. The BBC released a statement reading, "We have seen the statement from the police confirming they have completed their assessment and are not taking further action. We're grateful to them for completing this work at speed." It continues saying, "The police had previously asked us to pause our fact-finding investigations and we will now move forward with that work, ensuring due process and a thorough assessment of the facts, whilst continuing to be mindful of our duty of care to all involved." Well, meanwhile, the Sun newspaper says it does not plan to publish further allegations about Hugh Edwards. It comes after it published details of 4 claims made against him. They include allegations of paying a teenager for sexually explicit pictures and sending threatening messages. Well, let's bring you up to date now with some of the other stories making the headlines tonight. G7 leaders have signed a joint declaration in support of Ukraine, promising to stand by the country for as long as it takes. It comes as Defence Secretary Ben Wallace suggested Ukraine should show gratitude for the military support it has been given. But the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the Ukrainian people, including its president, are incredibly grateful for the support the UK has shown. The first asylum seekers have arrived at a former RAF airbase in Essex. 46 people are now at Wethersfield, with more individuals to arrive in the coming weeks. The site, which can house up to 1,700 single adult men, is expected to be fully operational by autumn. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Rory. Tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at tomorrow's front pages. And we start with Metro. And they lead with shock statement in BBC crisis. It is Hugh Edwards. Wife names him as the presenter in Sex Pick Stories. We should stress these are just allegations at this stage. Serious mental health episode is being suffered by the depressed star. And I revealed it out of concern for him and our 5 children, says his wife. Daily Star. BBC Star at centre of sex pics row is named by his wife. Newsreader, in hospital as cops say no crime committed. It's Hugh is the headline. We'll bring you more front pages very shortly. Let's get reaction now from my superstar panel. Broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Now, Hugh Edwards was today cleared by cops of any criminality relating to claims he paid a teenager £35,000 for explicit photographs. So has he been the victim of a media witch hunt? The newspaper's original story snowballed since first being published on Saturday, with the Beeb itself even breaking exclusive new allegations yesterday from other complainants. This is what BBC journalist Katie Razzle had to say on air about the scandal tonight.
This is such dramatic news. I mean, this is a man who has embodied BBC values, has been the face of the BBC, has held viewers' hands through so many of the kind of momentous, significant parts of our nation's history, whether that's general elections, royal events, the Queen's death, of course, the King's coronation. So I think we're all coming to terms with this news. Clearly, we've been saying for some time now that we have known the identity of the presenter but haven't been able to name him for legal reasons.
Matthew Larser, has Hugh Edwards been the victim of a media witch hunt?
I think the media have behaved inappropriately at times, but clearly so has Hugh, quite seriously. Allegedly, as far... yeah, absolutely. Can
I apologise for keeping on saying that?
No,
it's only right we do.
You're absolutely right. But I think that there is a distasteful aspect to the media coverage because, as we've said all night, as the police have made clear, there is no criminal actions as far as we know up to this moment, and all of the people we understand were above the age of consent. And I think that sort of conflating, as some of the media have done this with much more serious scandals is a real problem. You know, if it turns out that inappropriate, but the allegations are true and the behaviour will have been inappropriate, it appears it won't have been illegal, and that's a very, very big distinction. Now, clearly, somebody who was the figurehead of the figurehead of the nation is held to a very high standard. I'm not saying that Hugh is going to click his fingers and be back where he was, but I think we all need to be careful. And we've seen, the classic dispute where I'm particularly struck by the fact that the first young person wasn't listened to by the son. The son wanted to listen to the parents. It didn't ask the young person concerned, and this wasn't a child. This was somebody who was above the age of consent. So I think it's the media have got lessons to learn here.
I wonder about that, though, Adam, because if any of these allegations are proven to be true, I think any one of them would get him sacked anyway.
Yeah, look, there's been a complete... If the allegations are true, there has been a complete abuse of power by a powerful man, really, someone that is the figurehead of such a big organisation. Now, I want to try and highlight the hypocrisy of a lot of people that are saying this is a witch hunt and the media are acting... over the top. Because let me just tell you now, if over the last month, since Boris wasn't an MP, and hasn't been in Parliament, if this was Boris, there would be people cheering on the tabloids to print more. What else have you got? Get it out there. Right? So there's a lot of hypocrisy out there from these so-called be kind people that are saying...
Or if it was a commentator or broadcaster on the right, perhaps.
On the right. Look... He is a superstar name, and if these allegations are true, he has acted inappropriately, and I think a 60-odd-year-old man should know a lot better than doing this if he has.
Matthew, you want to come back on this before I get to
I'm just going to say, I think it is important that if inappropriate behaviour has been shown, that people on the left, I mean, it's broadly people on the left who've been calling out the so-called witch hunt today, do condemn it. But the problem we've got at the moment is we haven't heard from any of the alleged victims, one of whom says they are not a victim. So I think that's what's so difficult, because we don't know what the individual circumstances are going to be.
Let me tell you now, if there was no truth in these allegations, I would come out kicking and screaming. Or if I'm in hospital, I would expect my wife to come out kicking and screaming about my innocence. So,
Christine.
Well, I have personal experience of being accused of heinous sexual crime, i.e. rape. In 2001, my husband and I were very publicly arrested by the Metropolitan Police and accused by a girl that we had never met in our life. There was absolutely no truth in it. There was no evidence, but the police didn't care about any of that. They arrested us because they had failed so dismally on trying to get other people, and they'd missed Savile, etc. They thought, oh, my goodness, we've got a scalp here. We were hauled into Barkingside Police Station and arrested and confronted with these allegations. Now, we could have slunk away from that police station if there had been any truth in it at all. But there was no truth in it, so we came out with all guns blazing, and I'll never, ever... It was one of the worst moments of my life when our solicitor stood there and read out the allegations, which were horrendous. It was awful. Now, if these allegations are not true, Hugh Edwards had it in his power, either himself or if he's incapacitated in the Priory, his wife could have done it. He could have said there is no truth in these allegations. And his silence over all this in the last few days has been deafening. So one is drawn to the conclusion that there must be something in it. But perhaps if there isn't, he would have denied it.
Well, I wonder about that. I mean, perhaps he's keeping his counsel because there's an open investigation. Perhaps he's keeping his counsel because he's unwell.
If it wasn't true, he would have denied it, or his wife would have done. If it's supposing these things had been...
Well, we would.
Well, it might be that the incident...
Yeah. It's not just been inappropriate. It is reprehensible behaviour. And certainly for somebody who's a figurehead of the BBC like that,
Well, I think that some of them aren't. I mean, there's a range of these allegations. In terms of abuse of power, I think the difference to the... we've sat on this sofa and discussed in detail the Schofield case. The difference with the Schofield case is that the young person in question was an employee of ITV. Until this evening, where there appears that there may be people within the BBC have done it, none of these people were employees of the BBC. Nothing was alleged to have taken place on BBC premises. So that makes... I'm not saying that makes everything better, but it makes it different, and it changes the role of the BBC as employer.
I haven't for a moment said it was
I'm not. I know you haven't.
Schofield factor. I mean, for a middle-aged married man with 5 children to be, if this is what happened, to be asking young people, whether they were boys or girls, to send them sexually explicit...
OK. Well, here's the million...
I think...
Here's the million-dollar question, which I'd like all three of you to address, though. Were The Sun acting in the national interest, publishing this story and their reporting of the story and the tone by which they reported it? Because many feel this has been a witch hunt against Edwards.
The Sun always acts in its own interest. Of course it does. I mean, that's what...
So would you say that they were not acting in the national interest? Did we have a right to know?
Well, this is the big question. What is in the public interest and what is the public interested in? I think if a perfectly normal individual who was not high profile had been doing these things, I don't think we necessarily have a right to know. No, of course, we have no right to know if it's not illegal.
Allegedly, yeah.
But, you know, he's a very high profile person. He earns a monumental amount of money, which is paid for by the licence payer, many of whom can very ill afford that money. And I think, I'm afraid, if he is behaving like that, or he has behaved like that, I think we do have a right to know.
Matthew, yes or no, were The Sun acting in the public interest, the national interest, with their reporting? Because many of your mates on the left think they were not.
I think they weren't in the way the original story was reported. If somebody had reported a thought-through series of allegations... the FT's done a lot recently with people in business, but they've done it with clear allegations that have been double and triple-checked. And clearly that Sun story, you know, there were holes in it.
Adam Brooks, briefly, what do you think? Were The Sun acting in national interest?
They were acting in national interest. I've got 4 or 5... I pay for 4 or 5 BBC licence fees with different premises and my house.
How many houses have you got, Adam?
No, so at the end of the day, some of my money goes towards his salary. I need to know how these people behave.
All right. Well, look, this debate is going to rumble on. Coming up, my superstar panel return to debate whether celebrities' private lives are anyone's business. But first, political commentator and Margaret Thatcher's former aide Niall Gardner is flown in from Washington, and he gives his instant verdict on whether the BBC Director General, Tim Davie, should step down. Welcome back. If you're joining us, an exploding media bombshell. Hugh Edwards, the face of the BBC, the face of BBC News, the guy that was, of course, there on election night, the Queen's funeral, the King's coronation. He has been named as the BBC presenter at the centre of sex, pics, and, of course, these are just allegations at this stage, first reported by the Sun newspaper on Friday. Let's get the reaction now from a political point of view from top commentator, also regular contributor to the Telegraph newspaper, Margaret Thatcher's former aide, flown in from Washington in the United States, Niall Gardner. Niall, great to have you in the studio.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much, Mark.
And we're still processing the scale of this story. Hugh Edwards, the biggest star on the network. This is a crisis.
Yes, it certainly is. I mean, what a shocking development this evening. And I think the damage to the image and reputation of the BBC is absolutely huge here. And so if all the allegations are indeed true, I think we are looking at the rotting heart of the BBC, actually. And I think there will be major long-term consequences as a result of this. And I think also there will be growing calls for an independent inquiry into exactly what happened here. So this looks like a real can of worms that's opening up a major scandal here, and I think immensely damaging to the image, the standing, the reputation of the BBC.
Indeed, if it was a television presenter that just hosted this series or that, perhaps a sports presenter or an entertainment host, a comedian, it would be damaging. But this is a guy that was front and centre of their current affairs coverage. I mean, you look at the pandemic, he was very much the face of, you know, all of the bad news we had around lockdowns, all the rest of it. One of the allegations, only an allegation at this stage, that he may have broken lockdown rules himself. So the organisation has got a major headache.
Yeah, I think so here. And these allegations are absolutely appalling. They're horrendous. And it really illustrates, I think, as well, if the BBC had not been upfront, honest about what's happening here, it represents a culture within the BBC, I think, that really needs to see the light of day here, because these allegations are extremely serious. And if the BBC did not act early enough in terms of revealing what was happening, then I think that that's an absolute disgrace in terms of how this has been handled by the management of the BBC. There should be consequences at the very top of the British Broadcasting Corporation with regard to how this has been handled, which is why I think we do need to see an independent inquiry. We can't just have the BBC investigating itself. That's utterly ridiculous. We need to see an independent inquiry into what's happening here.
Well, that's right, because the worry is that the broadcaster that we all pay for very expensively may not just have an issue with its procedures and the checks and balances in relation to allegations like this, but cultural too. I mean, some people are calling it a cover-up. I don't know if that's too strong.
Well, I think that it's outrageous, frankly, that the British taxpayer has to fund the BBC today. This will result in growing calls, I think, for the licence fee to be ended. Why in this day and age should you have a corporation that's actually funded by the taxpayer? I think for far too long the BBC has been hugely complacent here, and I think it's time for a new era in which actually the BBC has to pay its own way, like everybody else in the free market here. And so this will result in growing calls, I think, for the end of the licence fee, which is outdated. I think it's a ridiculous notion to keep that licence fee in this day and age. And I think this scandal, we're seeing also potentially just the tip of the iceberg here. And I think the BBC's handling of it has demonstrated a lack of transparency and accountability here. And the British taxpayer is actually having to fund all this.
Indeed. So, in your career and, of course, as a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, you know a thing or two about leadership, and you mentioned the management of the BBC. I wonder whether the Director General, Tim Davie, is considering his position at this moment, or whether he should.
Well, he should be, because at the end of the day, he is ultimately responsible for what happens inside the BBC. And if there's been any failure of leadership within the management of the BBC, then the head of the BBC should go. It's as simple as that. It's a matter of accountability. It's a matter of the leadership taking responsibility for what has happened here.
Briefly, another nail in the coffin for the licence fee. If these allegations are in any way proven right, it undermines the mandate upon the public to pay all that money every year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of the taxpayer having to fund the BBC, it's fundamentally wrong. I think it's unfair as well to competitors to the BBC, and the licence fee belongs in another era, not in the modern era today, actually, in terms of a great deal of competition in the market, and the BBC needs to be held to account. The licence fee needs to be, I think, thrown out of the window.
Niall, thrilled to have you in the studio, and thank you for flying in from Washington to see us. Always great to have you on the channel.
Thanks.
Normally you're down the line.
Yes.
From your rather fancy Washington apartment, but we'll catch up soon. Great to see you face to face. Listen, in the spirit of balance, I should argue that the BBC would say that they have millions of very happy viewers and listeners who enjoy radio. They enjoy music, current affairs, drama, you name it, and that the BBC do a great job. And look, it's very important on this show and on this channel to offer a balance of views. Is the BBC still delivering for you? Mark at gbnews.com. Now, BBC Director General Tim Davie has already admitted the affair has been damaging for the corporation, and he will launch a review into the Beeb's complaints processes. Brilliant stuff. Niall Gardner, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up soon, free speech champion Toby Young gives his take on the Hugh Edwards crisis. You won't want to miss it. He is not a happy man, but first, the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Stays unsettled over the next few days. We'll have showers on Thursday and then rain spreading in for Friday and turning quite wet and windy as we move into the weekend. Last area of low pressure that we've had the last few days pulls away, and then this area of low pressure moves in to end the week and into the weekend, bringing unsettled conditions for all of us. There's still some showers around to end Wednesday, largely across the north and the west. Overnight, the clearest spells across eastern and southeastern parts of England. Elsewhere, still a mixture of showers, and temperatures generally holding up in double figures tonight, generally 11 to 14 Celsius. So it means a mixed start to Thursday morning. There'll be some sunny spells from the word go, but also a scattering of showers. Thursday, as we go through the day, there'll be lots of sunshine in places, particularly across eastern areas. The cloud will bubble up. We could see some showers, but showers should be fewer and farther between compared to recent days. We could still see a few heavy ones, particularly across Scotland, but lots of places staying dry. And it will just feel a little warmer than recent days as a result. Generally high teens to low 20s. Highs around 24 degrees towards the southeast. Into Friday, it all starts to turn more unsettled. Areas of low pressure begin to move in, so we see cloud and rain sweeping in from the southwest, pushing northeastwards. This turning heavy at times, best of the dry weather holding on for longest across Scotland. Temperatures near average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up in Uncancelled, free speech champion Toby Young gives his take on whether the left are using the Hugh Edwards scandal to attack the free press in this country and a paper they hate in The Sun. But next, my superstar panel return to debate a very important question. Are the matters of celebrities' private lives any of our business? OK, folks, tomorrow's news tonight, and the front pages are in. OK, well, let's have a look at the Telegraph. Hugh Edwards named by wife as presenter, suspended by the BBC, and they've taken a screenshot there of this iconic broadcaster, very much the face of BBC News. In fact, I was just talking to a colleague earlier, a member of the team, Gabriella, and we both agreed that seeing all these television reports about Hugh Edwards, if the sound's not up, you just think that there's a bulletin happening and that he's on TV, but no, he is the story at the moment. Also, we're always grateful Zelensky tells Wallace after Amazon jibe. OK, Matthew, where should we go next? The I newspaper now. Hugh Edwards in hospital for mental health care, says wife. Also, this is a shocking story, £6,000 a year extra on an average mortgage. Now we've got the Express, and they devote the whole front page to Hugh Edwards. Deeply sorry TV anchor receives treatment as police say no crime committed. Hugh Edwards' wife names him as star in BBC scandal. Photograph there. I understand that that's a library image of Hugh Edwards and his wife walking hand in hand. OK, that's a couple more front pages. We'll bring you more as we get it. But now more on the media buzz with our superstar panel. Broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Now, police have said there was no crime committed in relation to the Sun's original Hugh Edwards story, which alleged the BBC man paid a young person £35,000 for sexually explicit photographs. I should stress, by the way, that this may or may not have happened, the payment, but it's not been deemed illegal by police. Hugh Edwards was additionally accused by The Sun of arranging meetups through dating apps and also sending flirty texts to others. But tonight, his former BBC colleague, now of the very successful News Agents podcast, John Sopel, called for all coverage of the scandal to cease.
We now know there was no illegality. So what are you left with? Someone's private life has come under scrutiny, who is now unwell. I think it would be a crying shame if this is the last we see of Hugh Edwards on television, when the allegations have turned out to be not that much. And I think all his friends will just be wishing him well at this stage, because Hugh commands huge respect in this industry.
That's quite the hill to die on. I'll be dealing with this issue in the coming days, because a story is a story. But despite committing no crime, yet being married with 5 children, is his or any other celebrity's private life any of our business? Why does it matter? Who cares? Why are we even talking about it? Christine Hamilton.
Well, if you're in public life, life is public to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, just take in our humble way, the 3 of us sitting on this sofa, not to mention you, if we expect people to listen to us by tuning in, then they are entitled to be interested if we do something that they consider to be reprehensible, or if we do something which they consider to be newsworthy. Now, I know social media has got some of this completely out of proportion, and there's an awful lot of stuff on there which is beyond the pale and horrendous. But I think you cannot expect, as I say, if you're in public life, you cannot expect the public not to be interested in other aspects of your life. I mean, you can't just expect them to listen to what you say on any subject and that's it. They're bound to be interested. And I mean, Hugh Edwards would have known that. And I know it's all alleged, but he hasn't denied it. If it's true, his behaviour, it's not just not criminal. OK, it's not criminal, but it's pretty reprehensible.
It's a very strong word, Chris.
Well, yeah, because
it's all alleged, I know.
I wonder, I mean, if there's no illegality, I mean, the way that Sopel framed it in his podcast is that perhaps his great crime is having a complicated love life. Why is that our business?
I think the things that make it our business, if there's been an abuse of power, you know, if this was an employee relationship, the Weinstein-esque moments that have been exposed in the media industry are completely different to somebody having, you know, we might think that he may have, if the allegations turn out to be true, that he may have behaved badly to his wife, to his family. That to me is a private matter. If there's been no direct abuse of power. I mean, remember we're talking about all of the allegations, as I understand it, involve consenting adults, and if you know if you met them on dating apps, well, you know, why is that in itself reprehensible? It may be distasteful to some people. It may be, you know, inappropriate. People may comment on age differences, etc.
It's extremely distasteful.
But, Adam...
And, of course, we don't...
Within the law...
Yeah.
What you do in your own home, in your own four walls of the bedroom, is your affair. Why should celebrities be indifferent?
That is... Look, what you do in your house and what you do in your love life is your business to some extent. But I'll touch on what something Christine said. A lot of these people that are in the public eye and the media are there because of their popularity and their fans, not necessarily because they're good at their job, but they pull a crowd. They've got a fan base. That fan base has every right to know who they're looking up to and what the behaviour is.
I don't watch you. I mean, I'm a big fan of Elton John. Why should I care who he sleeps with?
No, but there is a moral thing here. Look, I'm 43. If I was messaging 17-year-old youngsters or young people, I believe that is wrong.
But isn't
now, a 60-year-old...
Can I just say that's a moral judgment? Yeah. Potentially ageist, Adam.
A 60-year-old...
We're all entitled to make moral judgments.
Why can't you text a 17-year-old? I know Neil would be mightily upset. But why can't you text a 17-year-old and say, hey, big boy, Chrissy here?
Excuse me,
she sends me that.
I'm sorry. I will not have you making suggestions like that, because I would think that was morally wrong to do that for a middle-aged woman to start encouraging...
Who cares about morals? That's just a subjective thing, isn't it?
I care about morals. And for a middle-aged person of whatever sex to be encouraging a young person to send them sexually explicit photographs, we don't know exactly what that means, by the way.
But on dating apps, I mean, Christine, can I just say, you know, without going into the details of the allegations, you know, on dating apps, people do send sexually explicit photographs. It's slightly different from, you know, that's how they work. It may be distasteful. That's how the young people, as it were, behave. And therefore, if the allegations are that they were kind of the photographs were sent, the thing about the 35,000 raises more questions. Indeed. Not least how he can his BBC salary is so large that he can afford it.
We see with Premier League footballers, you know, when they act inappropriately, it's all over the papers because they have a fan base. Because to some extent they are role models to people. Hugh is a role model to certain...
He's a journalist. He's not a role model. He's a journalist.
He is a role model to many people in this country. So we do deserve to know what is going on. Like with the footballers, kids look up to them.
But it's not like politicians who used to dangle their kids. I mean, we were, you know, the back to basics in the Major era. You know, Hugh Edwards. I listen to Hugh Edwards because he's a journalist, because I respect his authority and I respect his skills as a presenter, not because I've ever seen a picture. I've never seen a picture of his kids.
I respect Hugh Edwards because of how professional he looked on screen. Now, and
does this destroy that for you?
How professional as a person he seemed. Now, if these allegations are not true, a professional person does not send young people dirty images or receive dirty images, in my opinion.
OK, well, look, I will obviously stress these are allegations at this stage, but it's interesting to debate.
He hasn't denied them.
With the clock against us, are there any celebrities who do have a right to a private sex life? Is there a category? Is the problem for Hugh Edwards his role in the news and current affairs division?
It was between consensual adults. Well, all celebrities should have that right.
Yes,
right.
Of course.
Would you agree? Or would it be less bad if it was Match of the Day presenter or a movie star or something?
I think it's become as more of a shock to people that it is Hugh Edwards because he is a news presenter, probably, because people might think that... I don't want to...
His professionalism.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, there's another word, Christine. There's another word, I think, that we have a relationship with our newscasters, which is trust.
It's trust. Well, I was just...
He is also quite religious as well.
You expect people like Hugh Edwards, they are telling you something and you want to believe it, you do believe
Quickly, one thing you've just...
He presents religious programmes in Wales.
You don't necessarily believe what a football...
If these allegations are true, he's broke the trust of his wife and his children.
But that's a private matter.
And if you can do that to your wife and children, you can do that to anyone.
OK, well, look, folks, it's all about opinions, and that's what this show absolutely specialises in. Get yours through to our email, dan@gbnews.com. Let's recap. The police have confirmed that they have not found anything illegal in the actions of Hugh Edwards. He's been named by his wife. Hugh Edwards now in hospital being treated for mental health issues. We wish him well. We wish him a speedy recovery. He must be going through a tough time. And, of course, all of these allegations are just that at this stage. The BBC investigation continues, so it's important that we reserve judgment. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, free speech champion Toby Young investigates whether the left are using the Hugh Edwards scandal to attack the free press and attack a newspaper in The Sun that they don't like. Are they trying to close The Sun down? That's next. Also, it's time for Uncancelled, in which Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And depending on who you speak to, The Sun's exclusive story on the Hugh Edwards scandal is either old-school tabloid reporting at its best or outright gutter journalism. The debate has morphed, unsurprisingly, into a left versus right affair, with those of a more woke disposition seemingly keen to bash the newspaper for running the story at all. Former BBC journalist John Sopel also took aim at his old employer, telling former colleagues they need to look at themselves for their reporting on the story. Take a listen.
And so you're thinking, well, what has this all been about? And it has exacted a terrible toll on him as a result of the reporting. As a report, I would also say that I think some of my colleagues in BBC News need to look at themselves, because I think that some of what was said, reported and led on last night, which again was kind of, showed that someone had a slightly complicated personal life. It didn't show criminality.
Toby Young, great to have you in the studio. John Sopel, Emily Maitlis, the ex-Sun editor David Yelland, all having a go at the Sun newspaper for their conduct. Are the left trying to silence the free press?
Well, it certainly is extraordinary, I think, that these pillars of the metropolitan elite, rather than, acknowledging that one of their own may have done something wrong, and it's a time to pause and reflect, possibly a time for a bit of humility. Instead, they're rallying to his defence, attacking the messenger, saying, we must be careful, we better not say anything until the internal investigation's been completed. There are only allegations at this stage, even though the allegations seem to be multiplying, by the hour. Imagine if this had happened to a Conservative MP. Imagine if a 61-year-old father of 5, married Conservative MP was accused of all the things that Hugh Edwards been accused of, but it involved young women more than 40 years younger than him in one case. Do you think the Liberal elite, do you think Alistair Campbell, John Sopel, Emily Maitlis would be rallying around and saying, no, let's not jump to any conclusions, let's give him the benefit of the doubt? It's extraordinary. I mean, they'd be calling for his head, they'd be shouting from the rooftops, but because it's one of their own, it's a completely different story.
Do you think The Sun have a case to answer at all in terms of the reporting, whether it's the tone or the content?
Well, The Sun were reporting what was told to them by the family of the young man at the centre of this story.
And they took no money for that story.
They took no money for that story. The reason The Sun broke the story in part, I mean, the reason the family contacted The Sun is because they got so little joy out of the BBC. I mean, the mother says her reason for contacting the BBC, and this was back in May, was because she wanted she wanted Hugh Edwards. She claimed that he'd been sending her son money, and her son was using that money to fund a crack habit, and he was sending her son money in exchange for sexually explicit images. Now, these are allegations. We don't know whether they're true, but she was distressed enough to contact the BBC, or a family member contacted the BBC and said, all we want is for this to stop. Can you have a word with the presenter? They didn't want to go public with the story at that point. I think they tried the police, and the police said, there's nothing we can do. But the BBC seemed to have made only a very cursory effort to contact the complainants, and they didn't actually raise the matter with Hugh Edwards until last week, seemingly. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. So it's not... And they didn't actually react. They didn't actually get into gear, do anything about it, until the allegations broke in The Sun. So it's not surprising that the complainant, the mother, the family of this boy went to The Sun, because after going to the BBC, nothing happened.
Do us, the public, have any right to know about this story?
Well, I think we do. I mean, you know, I think it's partly because the BBC is taxpayer funded. He's one of the BBC's highest paid presenters.
He's effectively a civil servant. He's a publicly employed figure.
Yes, and I think if suppose he was in fact a civil servant, you can't imagine his employer treating him as leniently as the BBC are treating him. I mean, look at Dominic Raab, a senior politician drummed out of office because he'd unintentionally bullied someone. Priti Patel. We see, you know, it's a double standard. People whose politics are right wing don't get the benefit of the doubt. They get a hanging jury appointed immediately, and they're almost immediately condemned and shown the door. But for someone seemingly associated with the liberal left on the other side in this ongoing culture war, it's a completely different story.
Now, I can stress that the BBC are resuming their investigation. They only paused it because the police wanted them to, and that they have suspended Hugh Edwards whilst that investigation plays out. What about online? We've seen a parallel universe, haven't we, where anyone with access to Twitter has been able to speculate about who it was. Is that a good or a bad thing? Because I saw a similar journalist to the likes of contributors to the Newsagents podcast who on Sky yesterday said that not only should the free press be controlled and possibly not report a story like this, but it shouldn't be allowed on social media as well. What do you think of that?
I think the opposite. It won't surprise you to learn, Mark. I think it turns the privacy laws, which muzzle the press on the grounds that reporting the person's name would be an invasion of privacy. And the European Court of Human Rights has been extremely active in establishing a more and more broad and restrictive interpretation of the privacy clauses in the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to privacy. That's been used again and again to muzzle the press. But it's ridiculous when you can find out about it on social media, by doing a couple of searches. I mean, it seems to me that the European Court's going to have to reevaluate the interpretation it's placed on the right to privacy and stop muzzling the British press.
Do you think this increasingly censorious culture will see social media companies censured for running speculative tweets about the likes of...
I'm sure all the liberal elite panjandrums who are defending Hugh Edwards this evening and condemning The Sun and rallying to the defence of the BBC, I'm sure their response will be, well, it's outrageous that this poor man was ever named. The mother, his wife would never have felt under pressure had his name not been revealed on social media. We need to clamp down on this kind of Wild West that is social media. That'll be their response. More censorship, not an examination of the mores of BBC employees.
Well, indeed, because briefly, if you can, if the rules for newspapers were even more prohibitive in terms of being investigative and exposing the truth, then that's bad for democracy, isn't it? And you know, I spoke to Mark Williams-Thomas earlier, the man who helped expose Jimmy Savile, and he said that if it wasn't for The Sun and their bold journalism, we might not know about this story.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things which people often lose sight of in these scandals is that tabloids like The Sun play an absolutely vital role in informing the public about what these public figures, these highly paid public figures, often paid at the taxpayers' expense, what they're actually getting up to behind closed doors. And if we're paying their salaries, I think we have a right to know. Too right.
Let me tell you that Toby Young is the founder of the Free Speech Union. He is also the editor-in-chief of the brilliant Daily Skeptic website, highly recommended. Thank you, Toby. We'll catch up soon. It's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Christine, who's your greatest Briton?
Well, I'm completely away from the topic that's been absorbing us for the last 2 hours. My greatest
Felt
Briton
like 2 years.
Is...
That's how boring I am, Christine.
I'm so sorry. Start again.
I'm worse than Neil, aren't I?
Start again. My greatest
Don't worry, this isn't live. Or maybe it is.
Well, no, it's not.
Can I say I've achieved something rare there? I've silenced
You
Christine
have silenced
Hamilton.
me. It is
so,
live.
Christine, who is smiling upon you today?
It is on the screen now. It's Sir Christopher Chope MP who shouted object when the House of Commons were trying to pass the motion that would give them these massive recesses. The country is in a considerable mess. They've got a massive amount of legislation. They are hurrying things through. They haven't got time to consider things properly. And I think it would be better if they had slightly less recess and paid a little bit more attention to sorting out the mess the country's in. So Christopher Chope, MP, is my greatest
Excellent nominee. He's also spoken out on people who have suffered vaccine injuries.
He has indeed.
He's a heroic figure. Adam, briefly, if you can, your greatest Briton.
Mine is Alex Gibson, a very inspirational man that I met last week on Lee Anderson's show. He's got a charity called Challenging MND, which is motor neuron disease, and he's suffering himself, and he's raising well over £1 million. Very inspirational guy.
Brilliant stuff. Matthew, in a few words, if you could, your greatest Briton.
It's Laura Farris, who's a Tory MP, and yesterday she paid moving, emotional tribute to Harriet Harman, showing respect can cross party boundaries.
Well, I liked all the nominees tonight. I'm going to give it to the wonderful Alex Gibson. We wish him well. OK, let's now have a look at Union Jackass. And Christine, who's caught your ire today? Who's grinding your gears?
It's got to be the BBC for reasons which are patently obvious. They have
there you go. That will do it.
Fiasco.
We know why, don't we? We know why, Christine. Adam, your Union Jackass.
Mine is the world's biggest climate change hypocrite, and that is Leonardo DiCaprio, the guy that gets helicopters from his super yacht just to go for lunch.
Yes, although young girlfriends are very carbon neutral, I've been told. Matthew, your Union Jackass.
Mine's Michael Gove and his so-called levelling up department, who've not only failed to spend £1.9 billion they had earmarked for housing while the housing crisis continues, but also it turns out that since the Tories came to power, over half of net jobs have gone to London and the South East. Not much of a record.
OK, well, look, a very worthy set of nominations, but I'm going to give it to Adam and Leonardo.
I'll never win.
DiCaprio. Yes,
that's a double. I had a double last week.
You're on a roll tonight. Although, let me tell you, you're the first among equals when it comes to brilliant panellists tonight. Really enjoyed your company, folks. I'm back tomorrow at 9, where no doubt we'll continue to deal with this media bombshell story. And, of course, I'm here on Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well, so you won't want to miss it. Keep it GB News. Headliners are next. See you tomorrow at 9.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Stays unsettled over the next few days. We'll have showers on Thursday and then rain spreading in for Friday and turning quite wet and windy as we move into the weekend. Last area of low pressure that we've had the last few days pulls away, and then this area of low pressure moves in to end the week and into the weekend, bringing unsettled conditions for all of us. There's still some showers around to end Wednesday, largely across the north and the west. Overnight, the clearest spells across eastern and southeastern parts of England. Elsewhere, still a mixture of showers, and temperatures generally holding up in double figures tonight, generally 11 to 14 Celsius. So it means a mixed start to Thursday morning. There'll be some sunny spells from the word go, but also a scattering of showers. Thursday, as we go through the day, there'll be lots of sunshine in places, particularly across eastern areas. The cloud will bubble up. We could see some showers, but showers should be fewer and farther between compared to recent days. We could still see a few heavy ones, particularly across Scotland, but lots of places staying dry. And it will just feel a little warmer than recent days as a result. Generally high teens to low 20s. Highs around 24 degrees towards the southeast. Into Friday, it all starts to turn more unsettled. Areas of low pressure begin to move in, so we see cloud and rain sweeping in from the southwest, pushing northeastwards. This turning heavy at times, best of the dry weather holding on for longest across Scotland. Temperatures near average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.